Welcome back to our C Sharp beginner tutorial. In the previous lesson, we looked at properties. In today's lesson, we're going to look at namespaces. Okay, let me bring up Notepad and just write that down so you see the spelling. Namespace. Okay, it's written namespace or namespaces plural, namespace singular. Okay, so in today's class, we're going to look at namespace. What are namespaces? I'm sure you must have seen us write namespace. That's the keyword namespace. Aha, here it is. So in this our program, in fact, in all the programs we've been writing, you've been seeing. You've probably noticed this namespace. See it here, up here, namespace. Okay. Usually you notice in the keyword, by the way, the keyword starts with a small n, not a capital N. Okay, so not the way I wrote it in Notepad. Okay, I was just trying to show you what we're going to write. Okay, but the keyword starts with a small n. Okay, so if you're going to specify a namespace, you have to start it with a small n, Namespace. That's the spelling, namespace, and then you write the name of the namespace or the identifier of the namespace. Okay, so this is the identifier of this namespace, and you open a curly bracket, and then after writing all the classes that are inside that namespace, or the single class or one class, if you want, you can have one class. If you want, like we said, in when we treated, I think it was when we started looking at classes, we saw that you can actually have more than one class in one, inside one, what do we call this? I think source file. Yeah, we can have more than one class inside one source file. Okay. um what you need to know is that even inside the same source file, you can have more than one namespace. Okay, so it's not that because I've written namespace class basics here, it means all the classes that I'm going to write inside this source file have to reside within this class basics namespace. That's not true. Okay, so what I'm saying is I can actually have another namespace here. So I can have another namespace here. Maybe I'll call it my second namespace. Okay, remember this is just an identifier, so it can be whatever you want to call it. Okay, and I can open my curly bracket, close my curly bracket. Okay, notice this is one. In fact, let me minimize this. That's another thing you can do in Visual Studio. Okay, this little plus sign you see here, usually it comes up whenever you open a curly bracket and you close a curly bracket. Okay, notice also these two curly brackets. I can close, I can minimize this, the code, whatever code I've written in between these curly brackets, I can minimize them by clicking on that minus sign. Okay, so this plus symbol is telling you that there is a block. Okay, remember the curly brackets create a block. Okay, so it's telling us that there's a block here which will be minimized. So by clicking on that plus sign, we can expand that block. So this is the block that we minimize, by the way. Okay, notice that for this program block, this class program, you can also minimize that. Okay, so it's telling you that inside this block you have another block here of class program which you can expand. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and minimize this namespace. Exactly, so we have two namespaces inside the same source file. Okay, remember this is a program.cs source file. What I wanted to show you is that you can have another class here, class, say let's call it public class. Let's say I want to call it car. I don't know why I like car classes. Okay, so by doing this, I've created a car class inside this my second namespace. Okay, notice it is not inside the class basics namespace, but they are still the same. They are still residing inside the same source file. Okay, now these are very, very important. Notice, let me go to Notepad. I want you to note the structure. Okay, remember what I said. A source file is just a normal file where you can type your code. Okay, you can have different classes inside your source file. Okay, also you can have different namespaces inside your source file, inside the same source file. Okay, now you can have the same, you can have multiple classes inside the same namespace that is residing inside the same source file. Okay, so there's a source file, there's a namespace, okay, there's a class. Okay, they are all different things entirely. So I want you to I want to make sure you understand what they mean. Okay, a source file, like I've been explaining, is just a normal file, just like your text file you create when you open up Notepad. Okay, the whatever you write, whatever text you write and you save, and you decide to save that text file, you usually give it a .txt extension, which means it's just a text file, okay, containing some text that you've written. Now, for a source file, for a C# source file, the extension you give it is usually .cs. Okay, it's just a normal text file, and it has some like text or code written in it. Okay, that's what a source file is. Okay, now inside the source file, a namespace, as we've seen, this is how you create a namespace. So you just write the namespace keyword, you write the identifier of the namespace, and you open a curly bracket and you close the curly bracket. In between those curly brackets, you can have as many classes as you want. Now, whatever class, not necessarily classes, you can have interfaces. I know we haven't treated the interface yet. You can have enumerations or enums. You can have, there are so many different types. Okay, I know we haven't, in fact, let me bring up Notepad again. I know we haven't treated types. They're written like this. We haven't treated types yet. There's a reason why I have not even mentioned them, because for you to understand types, you have to at least know what classes are. You have to know interfaces. By the way, classes are just one category type of types. That's a very weird thing to say. Okay, so under types, you have classes. Okay, you have I know this discussion is diverting to something we're not supposed to be discussing now, but I just want to let you know that there is this types exist. Okay, types exist. There is interfaces. Let's just list some of the different category of types that we have. So we have classes, interfaces, delegates. I think, yeah, delegates should be under, I think, events. I'm not sure if events, but let's just put them down. Okay, just to show you that there are so many different categories of types. Okay, so a class is a type. Okay, but it's a different type of type from an interface. Okay, okay, I know that sounds weird. Just know that types exist. Okay, okay, so I can't even remember why we started discussing types. I think there was a reason I wanted to explain. Anyway, I can't remember, but just know that classes, interfaces, delegates, events, they are all types. Okay, I'm sure these are not all. There should be some other different categories of types. Maybe we'll come across them later, later in our classes. We're going to sooner or later we're going to have to treat interfaces. Okay, they're very important. So I think we'll treat them, but we might not look at delegates. I don't know. Maybe. Okay. Let's go back to our explanation of namespaces. Okay. I remembered. So the reason we're talking about types is that we wanted to. I was trying to explain what you can have inside namespaces. So you can have several different types of types. So you can have classes inside namespaces. You can have delegates inside namespaces. You can have what was the other thing we mentioned? Classes, delegate interfaces inside namespaces. Okay, all the different categories of types, you can have them inside the same namespace. Okay, back to our explanation of what namespaces are. Now when you create a namespace like this, what you're just saying to the compiler is that this car class is this car, car, of course you've said is a class, right? But for you to be able to access this car class, you have to make mention of this my second namespace before you can access this car. Okay, now it's just a way of structuring your code. Okay, it's a way of structuring your code so that you won't have clashes. Now let me just cite you an example where let's see an example of where a namespace would be very, very handy. Imagine if you have some code. Okay, so we created this public this class this car class, sorry. So imagine we created this car class and we have some code inside residing in inside here that defines our car class, and we are the ones that created it. Okay, and we suppose there's no such thing. In fact, let's eliminate that namespace. Suppose we're not using namespaces. Let's remove. Okay, I don't want us to tamper with our previous code. So just imagine this namespace class basics does not exist. Okay, so imagine we did not create that namespace. Okay, we just created our car class. Also, imagine we have another source file. In fact, let's go ahead and create another. Let me undo what I removed. Let me bring back. Okay, good. So I brought back the namespace. There's a reason I did that. Just for now, imagine there's no namespace. Okay, so we've created this car class, and it has some definition which we wrote. Okay, we created a car class which we're going to use in our program. Okay, maybe we're creating a game and the character has a car, and this is the definition of the car class that we created. Okay, now imagine there's another game which somebody else has written. Say another programmer has created another game, and in his game he has a car class. Okay, which the maybe a character uses in the game. Okay, and let's go ahead and create that new we're going to go to project, add class, and we'll just create class, and we're going to call it car. Okay, so remember, this car class is the one created by the other programmer. So notice, if you head to your solution explorer, this is residing in its own source file. This car class is residing in its own source file, which was written by some program. By the way, let's eliminate this namespace. Okay, class basics. Let's remove it. Okay, let's go ahead and remove that namespace. Suppose there's no namespace there. Okay, all right. So we created this. Okay, we're not the ones that created this car class. Remember, I said it's another programmer entirely that created this car class. And then in our program.cs, notice we have another car class. Okay, we have this car class residing inside program.cs. Okay, but also I said forget about the namespace. I want to show you why namespaces exist. Okay, so forget about, imagine there is no namespace. We created this car class, and the other programmer created this car class. Okay, now there are some things, for example, maybe in the car class we created, we did not like our engine. Okay, so maybe we have some implementation of engine, okay, that we do not like in our car class. But there's this in his own car class that this programmer created. We do like his engine. Okay, his engine implementation of the car class is well done. Like, we really like that engine implementation, but we do not want to we do not want to scratch, we don't want to use his car class entirely. All we're interested in is that his engine implementation of his own car class. Okay, now that means that in our program, we're going to be using our car class and his own car class. Of course, we're not using completely. The only reason we're using his car class is because we want to be able to access his engine implementation that he did in his own car class. Okay, that's the reason why we're using his car class. Okay, now it obviously means that we need the two car classes, this car class and this car class. We need the two of them to be residing in our code. Okay, we need both of them. Now, if we want to use our own car class, how do we access it? Notice that they have the same name. Okay, that's the identifier. This is called car, C-A-R. This is also called car, C-A-R. Okay, one way we could do is we could go ahead and change his own car and say maybe we'll change it to let's say car 2. Yeah, let's call it car 2. That's one way. But remember that anywhere within his code where car is used, it means we have to go in and be changing all that to car 2. Okay, so this is a very crude way of doing it, and it's not good. Okay, so that's not a good option for us. Okay, now imagine if there's no namespaces. It's almost impossible for us to achieve what we want to achieve, because if we want to use his car class, how do we access his car class? Suppose we in here we want to use his car class. We could say car. Notice which car we're using. This car we're calling is actually this particular car that we created here. There's no way for us to access his own car. Okay, now that's the use of namespaces. Now notice our car is written inside my second namespace. His own car, we could put it inside, we could create a namespace for his car and call it programmer2. Let's call his own namespace, by the way, I'll start it with a small p, programmer2. Okay, let's use a capital P. Let's start with the capital P. Okay, so we're calling his own namespace programmer2, and this is how you create the namespace. So you write the namespace keyword, you put the identifier, which we're calling it programmer2, and then you open the curly bracket, close the curly bracket. In between the curly brackets, that's where we're going to keep his own definition of the car class. Okay, by the way, let's create some let's make some differences between this car class and that car class. So suppose in his own car class he has something like let's say private engine string engine. I know this doesn't make sense. Why are we making a string? I just want to show you I just want to differentiate this car class from that car class. So in programmers2 car class, it has, okay, by the way, let's make it public, okay, so we can see it. We'll be able to access it from outside the class. So in programmer 2 namespace, there's a car, okay, and that car class has an engine string, okay. Whereas in our own car class, we're going to I just want to make sure they are different. We have something called, let's say we have public string tires, okay, okay, okay. So if we say car here, notice that we are not able to access car. Okay, the reason is because in this car is residing in my second namespace. Notice the namespace it is residing in. That's this car. It's residing in my second namespace, and then this program class, okay, where we're writing our code, okay, it's inside the program class. Notice that the program class is residing inside class basics namespace, which means that where we're writing our code is a different namespace from the car we're trying to access. That is why when you write car here, this doesn't make sense, okay? It does not exist in this namespace. So in order to access this car, we have to specify the namespace. So we have to say my second namespace, and then we put a dot and then car, okay. And maybe we'll say car because new, we'll have to repeat this again, my second namespace dot car. So whenever we want to use this car, we have to specify this my second namespace dot, and then we can use the car. Notice what I'm doing here. I'm just creating an object of this car. Now notice after creating the object, if I say car dot, or let's call it car 1, okay, car 1 dot, notice what we have there. We have tires, okay, which means we are actually accessing this particular car, okay. Now that's one thing I want you to see. The other thing I want you to see is, let's go ahead and remove this namespace, okay. Let's take out this car definition. Let's remove this namespace. Let's put the car definition within the same namespace as the program class. So after the definition of our program class, we have another car class. They are both residing within the same namespace, class basics, okay. Now notice what happens. It means that now we no longer need this my second namespace, okay. We just remove that, and we are able to access our car, okay. Notice there's no longer any error, okay. We can directly access this car by just saying car 1 equals new car, because they are both residing in the same namespace. This program class where we're writing this code is residing in class basics namespace. Also, this car is residing, that's this car class is residing inside class basics namespace. So there's no need for us to write something like this, class basics. Even though if you do it this way, it would still work. So I'm writing it out so that you see that it works. Class basics dot car, okay. Notice that if we write it this way, it still works fine. We can still access these tires from, notice we define tires here. So notice that it still works even if you write the class basics dot car. But because they are residing in the same namespace, you do not need to specify this, okay. So we are able to access our own car using just car 1, using just this car, okay, when we call car, because we're in the same namespace. Now if we want to, let's go ahead and do this. Okay. Let's see now. We want to access his own car. Remember, we said we like his engine. Okay. We want to access programmer's 2 car. Notice that this car is residing within programmer 2 namespace. So in our program.cs, for us to access that car, what we need to do is we need to say programmer 2 dot car. I hope this is making sense now. Dot car. Now this is the way you write the car class. Okay. So whenever you want to write the car class, you have to precede it with the name of the namespace and then a dot, then the car, then we will say car2 equals new. Remember, it's supposed to be car we write here, but because we are not in the same namespace, we have to write programmer2 and then dot and then car2, car, okay. And then open the bracket, close the bracket. Put our semicolon, and then notice now if I say car2 dot, notice what we're seeing, engine, okay, because it's this car. Okay, so that was why I just created that. I created this field, this engine field, just to show you that this car2 is of this class, is coming out from this class. Okay, you can see if you do car2 dot, you can see engine. Okay. However, for car1, because this car is coming out, this object that is being created is coming out from this class. Okay. Even though the 2 classes have exactly the same name, you are able to access whichever one you want. You can always specify if you want this. If you want this one, you can specify that you want the car inside class basics namespace, but because we are in the same namespace, that's why we're not writing the class basics here. Okay, so if you want this car, we can just say car1. We can just say car, and we can always access it. Okay, this is the car class, and if we want this car class, we can always say programmer2. That's the name of the namespace where the class resides, and then put a dot and then the name of the class. Okay, so that is the use of namespaces. Okay, I just want I took my time to write all this out so that you can clearly see the use of namespace. Now it means that you can have 100 different car classes which have exactly the same name. Okay, notice the name, the keyword used, namespace. Okay, namespace. It means even if you have, it gives you, like, it creates a space for your names. Okay, so even if you have 2 different classes with exactly the same name, if you have one class, one of them residing in a different namespace, you can still use both of them in your program. Okay, so that's the use of a namespace. Okay, now before I end the lesson, I would like to show you another convenient thing you can do. Okay, notice that inside this was residing in a different namespace. Okay, that was why we had to use programmer2. Okay, now another question pops up. Does that mean whenever we want to use this car, we have to specify programmer2? Now the answer is no. There's a way you can actually set it up so that you don't need to always call programmer2 whenever you want to access this car. Now, to do that, however, you have to also think about the way you structure your code. Now, remember, if you already have a class named car residing inside this class basics namespace, it means that whenever you call only car, And you have this programmer to also inside available to you. It means there's always going to be a clash. Okay, whenever you call car, there's always going to be a clash. However, if the two are in different namespaces, so by the way, let's go ahead and change this to namespace. I'm going to put this second car into a different namespace. We're going to call it or let's call it programmer1 namespace. Okay, so I'm putting this car class inside programmer1 namespace. There's a reason why I'm doing that. So now it means that here we have to always call programmer1 dot car equals new programmer1 dot car. Okay. And here let's just finish this up so we don't get the error. Equals sorry, not tires. For this one it's engine. Remember, for car 2 it is engine because there are two different classes. One has tires in and the other one has engine. Let's say V6. Okay. So what I wanted to show you is that notice we have this car class inside programmer1 namespace and the second car class inside programmer2 namespace. I want to show you a shortcut so that whenever you want to write, if you want to, suppose we want to access the car in programmer2, okay, and we are always going to be accessing it inside our code. There's a way we can shorten that by, you see this using system here. There's a reason why it's written there. It's actually for shortening the use anyway. Let me just not make too much. Let me not make it as if we're just talking. Let's just go ahead straight and writing the code, maybe to make you understand what the using is doing there. So we're going to say using programmer. When you write using, the next thing you it expects that's at the top. By the way, this using keyword, there are two different types of using keyword. There's the one that comes just before, that's at the beginning, at the top, the very top of your source file. Okay, that's this one. That's the one we're looking at. Later on in our programming lessons, we're going to see the second type of using, but for now, this is the using we're talking about, the one that comes just before the namespace, the name of a namespace. So we're going to say programmer2, okay, and then put a semicolon. Okay, notice that this system is actually a namespace. Okay, I know we've always been using system, but we don't know what it means. We'll come back to that. Let me just show you what the using keyword does. Okay, so we're going to write using programmer2 here. Okay, meaning we're saying that what we're telling the compiler is that whatever classes or whatever types that are defined inside programmer2 namespace, please make it available to us so that we don't have to always write this programmer2. Okay, now it means when we come down to where we're going to use this programmer2.car, we no longer need to write programmer2.car. We can just write car. Okay, we can just write car. Okay, notice it doesn't give us an error. We can go ahead and use programmer2.car without actually writing. So whenever we want to use the car residing inside this programmer2 namespace, we don't need to write programmer. That's within this program class. Okay, because we have already specified inside the source file that we want our programmer2 namespace to be available to us. Okay, so anywhere we're going to use programmer2 dot car, we don't need to specify programmer2.car. Okay, also okay, does that mean we can actually do the same for programmer1? Let's go ahead and try that, but I'll show you what the problem you're going to run into. So programmer1 and put a semicolon. Okay. So using programmer one, using directive is unnecessary. Okay, yes, because the namespace is already within the source file, so it will be unnecessary to say we're using programmer one. That's true actually. Anyway, what I wanted to show was that, remember, if you make two namespaces available to you, it now comes down to the same problem. Okay, imagine if we have programmer one available to us within this class and programmer two available to us within this class. When we say car, how does the compiler know the car class we are trying to use? Okay, so we run into the same problem. Okay, that collision, it's a clash. The compiler, when you say car, it doesn't know which one, so you're back to square one. Okay, so that means that whenever you have two classes that are named exactly the same, if you want both of them to be available to you, one of them, you can only make one of them directly available like this, and the other one or the other ones you must always provide the namespace and then followed by a dot. Okay, that's just it, because otherwise the compiler would not be able to know which of the car you're talking about. Okay, so if you have two car classes, you can always make one of them to be available to you so that you will always be using it directly, and then the other one or the other ones, you will have to provide their namespace whenever you want to use them. Okay, I hope that makes sense. By the way, let's go ahead and explain this using system. You see this system, it's actually a namespace. Okay, and the namespace, this system namespace, actually holds so many things that we have been using in our program. For example, this string, where is our string class, our string data type that we didn't use a string here. However, I think we used console.writeLine. Yes, we did. Yes, here it is, console.writeLine. Okay, you see this console.writeLine, it's actually this console, by the way, is a class, and this class resides within this system namespace. Okay, that was why every time we create our program, we always write a using system, okay, at the top. The reason is because, remember, this system is just a namespace. The reason is because we want that system namespace to be available to us. Notice what happens if we go ahead and eliminate that using system. I'll do that by just putting two, remember what these two forward slashes mean. They mean that the compiler should ignore this because it's a comment. So we've commented it out. So we're telling the compiler to ignore this line. So it's as if this line does not exist. Okay, so we've eliminated this using system. Now, what does that mean? It means that wherever we use console.writeLine, it is the compiler is complaining, or the Visual Studio is complaining that there is no console class does not exist. Notice what it's saying. The name console does not exist in the current context. Okay, it means that it doesn't know this class, this console class. It doesn't know where to find it. Okay, so one way you could do, you could actually use your namespace here, like we saw when we used the programmer1.car here. You can actually do system.console.writeLine. Notice it's no longer complaining now. But remember, here you'll have to do system.console.writeLine. Okay, so whenever you want to use this console class, you have to specify the name of the namespace that it resides in. Remember, this console comes with, I think it comes with bundled with .NET. It's not part of C#, but it's part of .NET. Okay, so whenever you want to start your program, instead of going in and we type in system.console.writeline, system.console whenever we want to use console.writeline, or whenever we want to use a console class, it's easier for us to just specify that to the compiler that we want the system namespace to be available to us in this source file. Okay, that's why we always write the using system. Okay, and then we can always use the console class without writing the system dot. Okay, so that's what a namespace is. I hope this makes sense. By the way, let's go back to our employee class. Sorry, in our employee class, you see all these string that we've been using. String. This string data type actually is a class. Like I said, it actually resides inside system. Okay, inside the system namespace. Okay, so if I go ahead and I comment this out, so I've commented that out. Notice how every string is being highlighted in red. Also the console, you see, console. It doesn't know what that means. Okay, because we have not specified to the compiler that we want the system namespace to be available in this source file. However, without telling it to make the system namespace to be available, remember you can always come in here and type in system.string and it will be perfectly fine. Okay, so system.string. But notice the problem. You'll have to go in writing system.string. Even here also you have to keep writing system.console. Okay, so I hope this explains to you why we always make this system namespace available to us. We always write this using system at the beginning of most of our source files. Okay, so whenever there are so many other classes that reside in different namespaces, not just the system namespace. Okay, there are other namespaces, like if you go to, I think when we created this car class, so here are some other namespaces. So there's the system. Notice this is a nested namespace. Okay, collections is not a class, it's actually a namespace. Generic is not a class, it's actually a namespace. Okay, so what the way this works is that inside the system namespace there's another namespace called collections. Okay, and inside that collections namespace there's another namespace called generic. And now inside this generic namespace there are some classes that are created in there. Okay, for example, like the list class. Let's just go ahead and use that here. So if I write public list string, okay, I know you don't know what this means, but I just want to show you this list class actually resides inside this system.collections.generic namespace. Okay, notice we can do that the moment we okay, let me just finish this. Let's say G. The moment we notice, this is not giving us an error, but the moment we comment this out, notice what happens with the list. You can see there's an error because it doesn't know where to find this list class. Okay, so the list class resides within system.collections.generic. Now I know there's a big question for a beginner. How do I know? Suppose like you get you go to maybe you Google how to implement some say procedure in your code. Okay, maybe you're learning you want to create maybe you're making a game. Okay, and you want to make the player to be able to jump. Okay, and you quickly Google it up, and in Google they tell you, okay, oh, there's a class called character. For example, there's no class called character. I don't know if there's a class called character. I'm just giving an example. And in Google, when after Googling, they tell you that some experienced programmer tells you there's a class called character in .NET, which you can actually use to make your character jump. So you don't have to make it from scratch. You can just use that character class. Okay. Now the big question comes in: how do you know which namespace to find that character class? Okay. Now this I'm going to give you a tip. Whenever you want to find the namespace of a class, okay, because you see, if you don't know the namespace of that class, it's almost impossible. You can't use that class. Okay, you have to either specify that you're using the namespace, or you have to specify the namespace here before you write the name of the class. Okay, so what you do, you just go to Google, and you sorry, not Google. You go to MSDN. MSDN. I think MSDN is acronym for Microsoft Documentation Network. So let me just write that in full. It's called Microsoft Documentation Network. I think that's the full meaning of MSDN. I'm not sure, but I do believe. Maybe look it up. I'm not sure. But I suspect it's that. Okay. So you go to msdn.com, and when you go to msdn.com, just search for whatever you're looking for. So suppose we're looking for say let's see, which class do I know resides in, let's say enumerator. Okay, enumerator. Okay, so suppose you're looking for this. Actually, this is an interface. Okay, so suppose you're looking for this interface, which namespace this interface exists within .NET. Okay, so you just go to msdn.com and you search for enumerator. Immediately you make that search, it's going to bring you, MSDN is going to give you the full details. In fact, you're going to get every single information. It will even give you examples of how you're going to use the interface. Okay, so MSDN is a very is a good resource for not necessarily beginners, even professionals. You can always go there and look up the name of a class which you've forgotten. Maybe you used to you used the class before, but you can't remember the namespace it resides in. Just go to MSDN and you and search it up and look it up, and you get information about the class or interface or whatever type you're looking for. Okay, so from there you can get the name of the namespace, and you can just come up here and type using that namespace, and you'll be able to use the class or type or whatever type you're trying to use. Okay. I know this class has been quite long, and I'm not sure if I think I was pretty off this lesson. I just hope people were able to grab or understand what I was trying to explain. So in this class, we looked at namespace, and we saw how to use namespaces. We saw how to structure your code with namespaces, and we saw how to what the using keyword means. That's like I said, there are two different types of using keywords. This is the one that brings in it serves like if you use Java, if you're good with Java programming language, this using here is very similar to import. That's import. Okay, very similar to import, but there's another using keyword. It's the same spelling, okay, but you do not use it here. You actually use it within code. Okay, and it has completely different meaning to this using. Okay, so the using keyword we saw today is the one for making a namespace available to you within your source file. Okay, I think that's all for today. I'll see you in the next class. Okay.